was not that you were on a roll. He said, we're going to take you on the road. Everybody's afraid to ask you a question. Julian? Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is partially where it all started between me and Margaret. Julian is, yeah, where's Margaret? No, not Margaret, unfortunately. Julian was the education chair for the NAACP when this resolution came through, and has been very instrumental in shaping our policy. Julian, blogger, and all kinds of stuff.
Julian Vasquez Heilig. I'm having dinner with him tonight.
The perfect tonic for such an exciting speaker. Bring up the professor. Let's talk about statistics. So first, I just want to say I need to confess to everyone in this room, and Ms. Huffman might not know this about me, but I first was involved with the charter school movement in Minnesota in the 1990s. Volunteered in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Then I was actually a charter school educator in the Bay Area, in an Aspire school. I'm a former charter parent. My child went to a charter school in Texas. I've even given money to a Bay Area charter school. But over the last 5 years, I've published research on charters. I'm a scholar, and we're in pursuit and convinced by evidence. So I'd like to talk about evidence today. First, I would like to go through 10 things that are swirling around in this charter school debate. 10 things. First one is, where did market-based school choice come from? In the 1960s, academics like the libertarian economist Milton Friedman, followed by Chubb and Moe in the 1990s, argued for a profit-based education system where resources are controlled by private entities rather than by democratically elected officials. They recommended a system of public education built around parent-student choice, school competition, and school autonomy as a solution to what they saw as the problem of direct democratic control of public schools. That is the burden of school choice. But school choice does not cure the inequality created by markets. Not surprisingly, the academics neglected to mention that market-based mechanisms are the very system that created the inequities in American public schools today. Along with other public policies, including redlining, market forces created racial and economic segregation. Instead of making this situation better, school choice in the research has made the situation worse. Research by the UCLA Civil Rights Project has demonstrated this fact, and in the green folders that I've given the folks from the National Board, you have the study from UCLA. And I have a few extra packets to give to the folks afterwards if they're interested. Homework, right? And there'll be a quiz tomorrow. So what does the research tell us when every kid has choice? Because believe it or not, that's been tried. A group of economists mentored by Friedman, called the Chicago Boys, took Friedman's theories about education back to their home country to push an education system with universal choice with lax regulation and oversight. Over the past several decades, Chile simultaneously became one of the richest countries in South America and the most unequal in the world. In markets, there are winners and losers. I'd also recommend you check out Linda Darling-Hammond's new book. She's a Stanford professor, Global Education Reform Movement. It compares when you do market-based approaches to equity approaches in countries across the world. Highly recommend the book. The position of the NAACP is consistent with the view of past civil rights leaders. NAACP co-founder W.E.B. Du Bois, in his essay, Negroes and Crisis of Capitalism in the U.S., extolled the virtues of collaborative and social government action. He railed against the role of business and capitalistic control that, quote, usurp government and make the, quote, throttling of democracy and the distortion of education and failure of justice widespread. What did Malcolm X have to say? He capitalized market-based public policy as vulturistic and blood-sucking. I don't think he could have been any more clear. He advocated for collaborative social systems to solve problems. Martin Luther King Jr. argued that we often have socialism in public policy for the rich and rugged, free market capitalism
for everyone else. Yep.
White academics pressing for market-based school choice in the name of civil rights ignore this history of African American civil rights leaders, advocating for collaborative systems of social support and the distrust of free market policies. Is the NAACP actually out of touch with civil rights with this resolution calling for a moratorium? No. There's been a barrage from the market-based choice proponents, charter operators, about the NAACP and the Black Lives Matter resolutions from their convention. However, the NAACP for years has been insistent in seeking out justice and civil rights on behalf of students in charter schools. In 2010, they passed a resolution. In 2014, they passed a resolution. And also in 2016. Do families actually choose charter schools? And this is where we can get into the literature. Probably the most prominent argument heard from market-based education proponents is that school choice means that families can choose their own schools. Proponents of market-based choice have argued that charter schools were designed to both have more freedom and more accountability. We've heard that here today. But critics of privately managed schools point out that charters are actually afforded less accountability, as Cecily talked about just now. Mr. Umgarner's remarks cited a recent report released by ACLU and Public Advocate that found at least a fifth of all charter schools had exclusionary policies, perhaps illegal exclusionary policies in their admissions approach. The New York Times has also talked about Detroit, and that there's no good choice in Detroit. In New Orleans, every school is a charter school now in the recovery school district. Yep. So you can only choose from a charter school. And New Orleans and Louisiana are last and nearly last in every single education outcome. So don't believe the hype. And one more thing, Jonathan Williams spoke to special education. We just recently published a piece in the Stanford Law and Policy Review. It just came out a couple weeks ago. And oftentimes you can look at state averages, and it looks like that, you know, if you eyeball the statistic, the special ed, ELLs, and other students, they look about similar in the state averages. So what we did was we used geospatial analysis and drilled down to the local level and compared charter schools to schools nearby. And what we found is that charter schools had statistically significantly less special ed kids, ELL kids, etc. That's what the data shows. So, why is more oversight and accountability needed for charters? Proponents for more accountability for charters want parents to be able to choose from high-quality public schools. Instead, if you read Kevin Milner's Dirty Dozen, which is published, a peer-reviewed piece published in the Teachers College Record, there's a variety of admissions policies that allow charter schools to select which students perform well. That's the idea of creaming. That's what creaming is. Charter supporters blame a few bad apple charters for limiting access and expelling too many students. But charter school supporters and their lobbyists consistently have supported laws in California and elsewhere, as spoken to by the previous speaker, that promote lax oversight and regulation. So they talk on the two sides of their mouth. For example, the California Charter School Association actively lobbied against 322. The pastor asked the Lord in our blessing for opportunities for us to collaborate. I was recently asked in a conversation with Howard Fuller where those of us that disagree about this issue could collaborate. Since that time, I've come to believe that accountability and transparency for all schools, traditional public schools and charter schools, is at place. And our teachers' unions lead in the opposition to school choice. This is number 8. Another common argument is that supporters from privately managed schools is that teachers' unions are the primary opponents of market-based school choice. But as Christina de Jesus from Green Dot mentioned, there are tens of thousands of unionized charter school educators in the United States. So the attacks on unions from charter supporters is misplaced. In fact, we can thank unions for the charter school idea. Albert Shanker, former president of the American Federation of Teachers, first proposed the charter school idea in 1988. But his perspective became that his idea had been misappropriated in the creation of anti-democratic, privately managed schools. He realized that charters were being increasingly going to a group of people who were, quote, eager for public funds, but couldn't care less about public education.
Thank you. Thank you.
Considering research and reports from the Detroit Free Press, the charter agenda press by Betsy DeVos in Michigan, and I was born in Michigan. So I read the Detroit Free Press and the Detroit News every single day. Michigan may be the worst example where the vast majority of charters are being for profit and they have the lowest accountability and the lowest transparency standard, and that's why those schools are low performing. And at the time, there is no good choice.
All right. All right.
So finally, last two bullet points. Who is supporting charters behind the scenes?
Yeah.
Now, I'm a Detroit Lions fan, and for those of you that follow football at all, you feel bad for me, right?
Yeah.
Even 5 years ago, we didn't even win a game. Okay? So the thing is that the charter schools have billions of dollars on their side. To promote privately managed schools, it's coming from non-democratic foundations, the Gates, the Broad, the Waltons, smaller organizations like VAEO, the Libre Initiative, Democrats for Education Reform. They have tens of millions of dollars to push this. We're the underdogs. But it's very clear that civil rights organizations, academics, parents, students, the media, and stakeholders have brought valid critiques. We should think about how we reform the charter reform. And finally, I'm going to be the stats professor. I took 8 stats classes at Stanford in graduate school, so let me be nerdy just for a second. I want to talk about credo, because they're going to wave credo and say, look, here's what credo says, right? The credo, 2009, 2013, 2015. Credo. Charter proponents often cite the studies by credo. Credo studies are not peer-reviewed. That means they do whatever they want. But charter supporters point to these studies. Now, what does the study actually say? You know, there's like hundreds of pages, so I said, I'm just going to flip to the page. I want to know how African Americans do in credo study. 0.008 is the impact of charters in the 2015 credo study. Let me just get right down to it. Which means that you need a telescope to see. Class size reduction, 400% more impact. Pre-K, 1,000% more impact than charters. We can talk more about that later. In conclusion, I've talked about 10 of the very contentious points in the debate today. But there's one major point of agreement. Poor students in the United States have less opportunity for high-quality education than the students living in wealthy areas. It's the shame of our nation. We must not do nothing, because African Americans, Latinos, and poor students continue to be underserved in our society on purpose. It's not by mistake. But there is an alternative. I'm bringing it home here. Historical and emerging research shows that the expansion of community-based, democratically controlled education approaches instead of private control and privatization are the best course of action for communities of color.
Yes.
So communities of color, unions, school board members, charter operators, teachers, and parents, we need to be seen as the solution, not the problem. Thank you.
All right.
I'm not going to wait to answer any questions, because we are supposed to be, thank you, Julian, we're supposed to be in the public hearing.